It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I'm so excited to be here today. I've got my colleague, Rick. Mike is on location doing his own little research on a project that we'll talk about in a minute. But Rick, so glad to have you here, man. How are you doing?
So excited. I feel I got promoted to position number 2. Look at that by default. I'll take it.
Yeah, it is fun. And we were having a great time going through these 7 critical factors of team strong leadership from the book Breaking Average. And I mean, that's what we're all about, breaking average. So Rick, your thoughts on this as we're going kind of I think we're at the midpoint on the critical factors.
We are. We've been doing the 7 critical factors to the team strong leadership. And today we're going to continue the conversation on trust. And I actually have just a little bit of inside information. We normally don't talk about times and dates in which we're doing this because, you know, there's editing and a post process and that kind of stuff. But I know the real reason that Mike's not here, and that's because Oral Roberts gave his team a heart attack in March Madness. I'm talking about that last second shot. It almost went in. What a fantastic game. That's not the truth. If we're talking about trust, I don't want to start the trust episode off with a lie, but what a great game. And I was fully ready to talk about that with Mike today and just had to get that out.
Yeah, but it makes you wonder, right? I mean, Oral Roberts, that's crazy. What great job to Oral Roberts University. I've got a good friend, Carrie O'Neill. Carrie, if you're listening to this, I know you do listen to this podcast, can't talk today. He played for them back in the day, and so he's been wearing his jersey proudly, and they certainly did well. Sweet 16, great job, Oral Roberts University, fantastic. Yeah, Mike is on location with his son, Clayton, and they're playing a little golf out there. Well, not Mike. Mike doesn't play golf. At least he doesn't play as well as his son. His son is in a big tournament, and it's a big event. So we're wishing him the best, and we'll get a chance to kind of see him cameo eyes here in a little bit, but we'll bring him in from a little discussion we had. So yeah, we're missing Mike, but and we're missing Diane. Oh no, Diane couldn't join us today. Unfortunately, is under the weather, so we don't have Diane. But we got Rick and me, and we've got a special guest here in a little bit.
Yeah, but still, we're going to continue this conversation on trust, and we miss our people. It feels a little weird because the other thing that we're really going to center in to today is dependability. It feels weird that we have 2 of our people missing, but dependability doesn't mean we don't do the show without them, because the audience has a dependability that we're going to air every Thursday. And that we're going to do our show, and then we're going to continue. And then there's varying levels of dependability. There's dependability to yourself, right? Yeah. And taking care of yourself as Diane needs to do to get better, right? She under the weather, you really sometimes got to take that break. And of course, you know, Mike has a lot of different commitments, and the one thing his son can say is that my dad was there no matter what commitments he had. My dad was there watching me doing that thing. So there's varying levels of dependability, but I did find it weird as we were coming into this going, do we roll, you know, just the 2 of us with this being the topic? And the answer is absolutely. Yeah.
And you nailed it on the head, right? Dependability. We got to look at our priorities and responsibilities. For Mike, you know, he's got his son who is I really believe, Rick, he's going to be a professional golfer, but he's not there quite yet. Right. And with COVID, he hasn't played in an official tournament in a while, and he's back in play. This is a chance for Dad, for Mike, to really, lift up his son. And it's great. It's good. That's a good example of dependability. And to your point, sometimes we've got to take care of ourselves so we can be more dependable for others. And we hope Diane the best, that she recovers well. So this is fun. We've got we've got some, 3 elements of each of these factors. And can you unpack a little bit of the elements for this factor?
For sure. We're talking about trust, and the 3 elements. We did credible on the last one, where we heard the greatest phrase coined in a long time, which is you can't be incredible unless you're credible. And that was said by Paul Gustafson on the last. If you haven't heard that one, you need to go back and listen to it. Today we talk about dependable, and on our next podcast we talk about the 3rd element, which is serve. But dependability is just a great word, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna really break this down. And I normally start with a quote, and the one that I found was by Roy Smith, which is dependability is sincerity plus willpower. And I like that, because there's a sincerity in the commitment, and then there's the willpower to follow through, and that's what equals dependability. And I can't wait to get into this topic.
Yeah, this is so powerful, this conversation, and I really like the lead up on this. But first, we're going to invite everybody to visit our website. Just go to breakingaverage.com. We got also breakingaveragepodcast.com. You can get there either way. And we just want you to come visit us. Tell us, what's your big takeaway from our podcast. Let us know if there's a leader out there that you would love for us to interview. We're always interested in talking with those who are breaking average, and we're going to do that today. So, Rick, we have a just phenomenal interview. I met David Horsager a few years back in 2012. I read a book called The Trust Edge, and was blown away by it. And to this day, it still is a kind of one of those books that resonates with you. I mean, you've read books like that where they're just kind of like, wow, there's a thought, there's a message, there's content in there that just keeps reverberating for you. And certainly with David, he's the best-selling author of this book. It's The Trust Edge. He's the CEO of Trust Edge Leadership. He's got clients, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. I mean, he's talked to some of the best professional teams, baseball, football. He's got a great story, and he's just fun to talk to and sit down with. And I had a chance to sit down with him. He's got a brand new book coming out that you'll hear about. And let's give this a listen. He is... He's going to be somebody that's really going to speak to us, because he is the leadership expert on trust. I really believe it. He's done all the research. He's seen all the evidence, and he's got something to share. All right, I'm here with David Horsager. It's exciting to be with you, David. You and I, we've known each other for a little while. Back in 2012, you and I connected when you wrote a book called The Trust Edge, and that was a great conversation. Then a few years later, we got a chance to watch a football game together in Minnesota. But here we are. You've got a new book coming out, but tell us about your leadership journey, and how did you get to where you are today?
Oh, Paul, thank you so much. It's been a treat to become friends, and I am so grateful to know you and your work. And it's just fun to be in this battle of sharing truth and trying to make an impact and change the world together, alongside each other in different ways. So I'm grateful for you. My journey, started being the youngest of 6 kids and trying to want to be heard and known, I suppose. But finally, I was director of a youth and family organization. That led me to be speaking and studying leadership. I built some curriculum. Later, I was asked to go speak at the U.S. One of our great academies in the U.S. So I was just affirmed along the way to share this truth. And I had an epiphany. I was at an event or doing some work, and I still remember where it was. It was before kids, and Lisa and I were together at the nicest resort we'd ever stayed at up till that point, and we're looking outside of our little villa at the Lowe's Resort in Arizona somewhere, Tucson, and I just was looking at the stars, and I was just thinking, the problem that company thinks they're having is not a leadership problem, it's a trust problem. And I said, oh, that problem isn't a sales problem, it's a trust problem. That problem is an innovation problem. They're not sharing ideas because they don't trust each other. And so I had this little epiphany about trust. That led to my graduate work. That became important to some people much more known than me, and that kind of launched me in certain ways. I started using the work, and it had success in companies and organizations, and that led to the book that, once again, miraculous deal for a farm kid from Verndale, Minnesota, became a Wall Street Journal bestseller and other things. And then I started using it in my own life, and it changed me. So, that's a really quick 20 years to now working with everything from, the New York Yankees to global governments to corruption issues in East Africa and some of the greatest companies and faith organizations in the world. But basically, what came from this epiphany around trust, now we do a research piece on trust every year. I speak about 100 times around the world on trust, of course, writing and stuff. But we do some deeper work of certifying people to use our work and consulting and using our enterprise trust index to really close gaps around trust and get at the root problem, which we believe is always a trust problem.
Yeah. So yeah, let's kind of unpack that a little bit, because I still want to know a little bit more about your leadership journey here. But on the whole element of trust, let's talk about culture, for example. Especially in light of everything that's happening right now. Here we are in the midst, as we record this, it's the midst of COVID. There's challenges across corporate America, across the world. And culture has never been tougher, I think, for some of our corporations, right? Because they're trying to establish trust with their team, and they're trying to pivot with what's happening. What are the elements of trust in terms of that culture? What are the elements of trust? You mentioned leadership, but kind of pull on that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So
well,
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, real quick, there's two sides to the research that need to be known. One side, and you have to maybe jump here first, and then we can get to exactly the how. But basically, first side, and I talked about this in the first book, The Trustage, the first whole finding was a lack of trust is the biggest expense we have. Trust is always the root cause. And really, I talk about this more now from the newest research, and that is how trust is always the leading indicator. And I say that without ego, just with a whole lot of research and now experience on 6 continents. Everything else lags the trust. So you can say, I've got a leadership issue. I never do. The only reason I follow a leader or not is trust. I got a sales issue. I don't. The only reason I buy or not has something to do with trust. We got a learning environment issue. Well, the only way a teacher can increase learning in the classroom is increase trust in the curriculum, the content, the teacher, or the environment, psychological safety. So innovation only goes up when trust goes up. They can share ideas. Even today, marketing, the only way to amplify a marketing message is increase trust in the message. Diversity, we're talking about it a lot today, right?
Yeah.
The biggest Harvard study would show diversity on its own pits people against each other unless you increase trust. The only way to gain the benefits of diversity is trust. So this first side was just this case that really made me shift my thinking. I thought trust was just integrity and character or some things. It's actually these 8 elements that came out of that research. And I talk about them in that first book. Now we talk about them as far as how do leaders build them in Trusted Leader, the new book. But it's the same with culture. It always comes down, and the research shows it was revalidated by an outside university even this year, triangulated revalidation, that these 8 pillars are the way trust is built globally. And so these 8 are components of a high trust culture, and they're we could touch on all of them, but were they clear or ambiguous? Clarity is trusted. Was it compassionate? Did I feel cared about? I don't tend to trust people if I don't feel cared about. Were they high character? Were they thinking beyond themselves? Were they willing to connect and collaborate? Did I get the results I wanted? So I apply these, when you say culture, I apply them to culture, to grow high performing teams or organizations or global governments, or it's a big one, as you can imagine. The country we're in right now, we're both speaking from the U.S. and the challenges here, but it's the same 8-pillar framework applied a little bit differently for an individual or a salesperson or whatever.
Yeah, and I want to unpack that 8-pillar in just a minute, because I think it's so important, because I think everybody's on their seats like, okay, what are the 8 pillars? But before we get there, let's just kind of wrap up that leadership journey. That's just powerful to me that you shared that story of that epiphany moment. But what's one word that you would use to describe your leadership journey to this point?
Work. I mean, in one way, I would combine it I don't think I'm perfect. I'm not perfect at any of the stuff I'm teaching. I just know it's true from the research. But right now, as a dad, I feel like, man, it's work to live this, at home, on stage, off stage, all this. It's really work to live out the way we really, really believe. And it's a high call to live this way, to live in this glass of being a high trust servant leader. I think one other word I'll give you too is just, I don't know if this is, this just jumped to mind from you saying it, example. I was very fortunate to have examples of high trust servant leaders. And when I talk about this work, a lot of people go back to my grad work a couple decades ago, or they go back to my speaking or whatever. I would have to go back a few more decades, or a couple more at least, and think of, I was very fortunate to grow up on this farm under the leaders of my parents, and especially I think of in this work, my dad, and how everybody on the farm wanted to work, people wanted to work for him. And watching him on stage and off stage, I think how he led was so inspiring. And when I come around to it, I think that's really partly where it started. I mean, when you think of leadership journey, I was captain of the football team, homecoming camp with some things, but I was really this kind of leader. We know people that are known. We know influencers, right? You and I, they're having an influence. But this kind of leadership I'm talking about that has a positive influence, and that's definitely a part of my journey. Is the examples I got to see. One of them was my dad, and then I used to say on the farm, and that is, that pile doesn't just shovel itself. Those hay bales don't bale themselves. The corn doesn't cultivate itself. You got to do the work. And that's the same with your life. We got to do the work. It's this trust stuff is work every single day to really live out being a high trust leader.
Yeah, and let's talk about, so we put in the work, but what's the results of that, right? Talk about just the fruit of that work. Can you highlight that? Because, it's so easy for us. Here's the thing, right? One of my fears is the fear of the process. Right? When I start to think about all the work that has to be done to get something, it may make me hesitate and pause. It's one of my impediments. Like, whoa, that's a lot of work. I don't want to go do that. But the truth of it is if I step forward, right, and I make a bigger deal out of it than I ought to, if I step forward and just initiate, because it's always about inertia. Once I get going, then there is a benefit to that work. So can you talk about that real quick?
Well, I can take case studies from both sides, personal and public. I can tell you, I lost 52 pounds in 5.5 months, right? That was not a weight loss idea that I came up with. It was actually in the middle of my trust work, seeing an idea under clarity that taught me how I ultimately ended up being able to lose 52 pounds in 5 months and now keeping it off for almost a decade. That same process that we developed under the clarity pillar, many have used and emailed us and called us and said that helped them triple their sales. So that is personally, I can give you that idea happily, freely, but you have that, and then I have case studies in companies. We have companies that have, dropped retention by millions of dollars in 9 months when they started to do the work. And so I think it's also not just doing the work, it's doing the right work. And so I think what you said about momentum and inertia, people do make it harder than it is. Even this trust stuff, it's actually relatively simple in form. It's like, it's this, and this. That doesn't make it easy, actually, to apply consistently. And that's one of the pillars. One of the pillars is consistency. We're trusted for whatever we do all the time, right? So if you're late all the time, I will, in fact, trust you to be late. And that's the problem with this, is doing it consistently. And that's the only way to build a reputation is consistency. The only way to build a brand is consistency. And that's where the work comes in. We can, having that character pillar for a little while, that doesn't, if you're not doing it consistently, it's not really character,
Yeah, that's so good. Because when we talk about, trust and from a breaking average standpoint, and I definitely want your thoughts on what breaking average means to you. But, we talk about being credible, being dependable, and being serving as elements of trust. And certainly you tie to that. So I think the world wants to know these 8 pillars. You've already mentioned a couple of them, clarity. And let's just unpack those. Just share with everybody what those 8 pillars are, if you could.
I'm going to go fast. For context, because I can talk about each one of these for a full day, right? So these 8 pillars, I believe you can solve every organizational leadership issue against. And I believe these are the 8 ways that trust is built. So here we go. Number 1 is clarity. We trust the clear and we mistrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. So whenever you over complexify something beyond what is needed, you lose clarity, which loses trust. And it's the same. I remember being a professor, and people used to have egos and be all big words, and students would lose trust because they it wasn't clear, right? The simplest form you can have, that's the most trusted. Number 2 is compassion. And this piece of research really got it. We don't trust people that we don't think have some care beyond themselves, and often even for us, but at least beyond themselves. Number 3 is character. We trust those that do what's right over what's easy. The leaders that had this pillar were marked by that idea. They did what was right over what's easy. We do have a 7-step process for how you drive character in an organization. People think you can't after 12 years old. That's totally not true. You can totally change the character of leaders and organizations. Many people incentivize a lack of character through promotions and stuff, so they get that in sales teams. You have to incent what you want, but anyway. Number 4 is competency. So I might trust you. Capability was part of this funnel. So I might trust Paul, you, to take my kids to the ball game because you have compassion. I know. You have character. I know. You have those pillars. But I may not trust you to give me a root canal, right? Because of competency at that specifically. So in the area you want to be trusted, you got to be competent. And that's why I might trust, Tiger Woods to play that round of golf, but I may not trust him to take my wife on a date, right? Or something. So character, competency, they all go together. Commitment is the next pillar. And that this idea is that we trust people that we believe will stay committed even after adversity or in the face of adversity. So if you think of anybody in your life or history, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Gandhi, Jesus, or Joan of Arc, you'll find that person was trusted because they were committed to something often beyond themselves. And commitment breeds commitment. I'll give one tip under this pillar right away, a simple, easy one. People ask me, how do you rebuild trust once you've lost it? I can tell you what it's not. It's not the apology. You never rebuild trust on the apology. Doesn't mean you don't have to be humble or sorry for doing something, but we often hear, I'm sorry I'm late. No, you're not. You're late every time. We don't trust the apology, rebuild trust on the apology. It might open the door if it's genuine. The only way to rebuild trust is to make and keep a new commitment. And even in our 10-step process for rebuilding trust, if you're a massive organization and it has an oil spill, it ends with you've got to make and keep a new commitment if you want to rebuild trust. Next one is connection. Really close to connecting and collaborating, the willingness to connect and collaborate. We tend to trust people that are willing to connect and collaborate, not be solo, not overvalue independence, but value interdependence. And there's a whole lot more we could say about that, how we do it. Number 7 is contribution. This pillar, the number 1 word that came out of the funnel was results. We trust people that contribute results. So I got to go in for surgery. It's an amputation. The surgeon cuts off the wrong leg. That surgeon might have been compassionate, even character, but because they got the wrong result, didn't contribute the right result, I might not trust them, right? And the final pillar is consistency. And it's the reason we trust McDonald's even if we don't like them. I've had the same burger on 6 continents, right? I know what I'm going to get. Pickles off-centered everywhere I go. So that's a brief, of the 8-pillar framework, and we can go deeper on all of them, and each of them have takeaways you can use tomorrow to increase that. But you can use this, you say, I need to amplify that marketing. Well, is it absolutely clear? Does it show compassion to those you want to sell to? Is it got the character we want to represent as a company? Are you going to walk through it? Oh, we've got this message. We've got this person. They all work together, and you need they're relatively co-equal in the research. So you might say, oh, we got the clarity thing. We're clear about our vision, but you only share it at the annual meeting. Well, if you don't share it consistently every 21 days in some way, nobody knows it. So you just lost clarity because you lost consistency. Or you might have, we're losing commitment here. It might be because of commitment directly. It might be because you're not showing compassion, so you lost commitment. So they work together. They can be contextualized. Obviously, there's some things I could say about how you use them internationally and where you might start differently than around the globe than in the U.S., but that's still the same 8.
Yeah. I love these 8 because we talk about evaluating the trust levels. Evaluating the trust level as a leader, evaluating the trust levels for the contributors on your team. And we really kind of think it's so important to think of your team members not as employees, but as contributors. They all want to contribute. And when we have that dialogue and that discussion, and they feel like, oh yeah, I am a contributor, that's so important. But we need to evaluate that, and we can evaluate what we do as a team together. Those 8 factors are, just in writing them down, and I've seen these before, and you and I have had conversations before, but it really kind of unpacks for me. I can see a table. I can see, I can kind of measure myself on those. I can kind of evaluate my team on those. And certainly there's other key performance indicators that I know that you've been working on to help people with this thing. This is a big deal.
Hey,
this trust element is so important, isn't it?
I promised something to your people. I think Gabe just let me know. And it's, and you'll have your show notes, but trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average. And we actually are giving a free trust pulse assessment that it's just a conversation. It just gives, 3 behaviors under each of the 8 pillars. You can just look at this. It's just a self-print ones. We have 6 ways we measure trust. Everything from enterprise trust index, technology driven to self-assessments. But this one is just, your listeners can just print it off, look at it, and think, how am I doing on this, and this, and process it. If you have coaches on the call today, they can use it as a conversational piece with the boards or leaders that our coaches use it all the time. So you can it's a conversational pulse assessment that you can print yourself, that you're giving away because we're friends, right?
Yeah.
So that's one simple way to evaluate. And actually, sometimes that conversational assessment is as good or better than the big technology driven one. So,
oh, that's cool. Thank you. A fantastic resource. Can't wait to put that out in everybody's hands, and appreciate you sharing it. And I've seen bits of what you've done before, and I just wow, I am blown away by some of the research that you and your team have done in putting together something. And you mentioned, it's funny you mentioned that word work, because you guys really have done the work. It's easy to kind of do lip service. Yeah, trust is important, but you've gone to the full ends to explore, why is trust so critical? Here's what you can do to improve your trust. And here's some ways for you to measure your trust,
I had to prove myself early on, by the way. Remember, I was an unknown, nothing. So you had other people kind of that could get by with motivational, whatever.
Yeah.
I had to back then. Now people get it. Forbes made trust the business word of the year a couple years ago. Best place to work throughout engagement, put trust as the #1 metric. I mean, people getting it now. But 20 years ago, oh, trust, that's kind of mamby-pamby. Oh, trust, is it really? I had to show the research. So I'm still kind of used to having to prove, myself. Yeah. And, we had to win on results, and just like you do.
Yeah, I think the research is so critical, because a lot of folks are from Missouri. They show me, right? So you've got evidence of it, which is important. And trust isn't a soft skill; it's an essential skill. As Mike Harbour, who's my co-host, we talk about, what are the essential skills? Well, trust is really an essential skill for a leader, for a contributor, for a team. So important. So I love this. Well, we hope you enjoyed that interview. It was just so much fun to sit down with David. Rick, what did you think? That was pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, very good. Very good. I love the 8 pillars, and I'm excited to unpack it for sure.
Yeah. Those 8 pillars. And again, if you go grab his early book on the Trust Edge, you'll get it. But this new book, The Trusted Leader, it tells just an amazing story in terms of how we can apply that, how we can use that, how we can make an impact. We're going to share a little bit of that today. So there's a lot of gold dropped in that conversation. I loved his take that, diversity. When you talked about trust is a #1 factor to leadership, sales and marketing, learning, culture, diversity. And that part on diversity I thought was really interesting. He says, Paul, think about it. You can't have that culture and that environment of diversity unless you have trust in it. It's the only way to get the benefits of diversity is through that trust. And I think he's spot on. I mean, it's just a critical thing. Those 8 pillars of trust, like you mentioned, are solid. And we're going to kind of hone in on 2 of those. I think commitment and consistency, although they all matter. Yeah, so Ricky's got a brand new book coming out, as I've already mentioned, The Trusted Leader, and he created a special resource just for us.
That's right. And as our in-kind sponsor today, we wanted to promote him. But as you just heard, he and his team created this link. It is trustedleadershipbook.com/breaking average. And what we need is our audience to show out. So if you hear us, if you listen to us, if you've ever been inspired by us, please go click on this link to show David Horsager the power of the Breaking Average audience. That is trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average. And while you're on the web, why not go ahead and go visit our site as well, breakingaverage.com or breakingaveragepodcast.com.
Yeah, and we'll drop that link in there as well. So if you're having a hard time finding trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average, which shouldn't be that hard, you'll also find it on our site at breakingaverage.com. And we're so thankful. It's a great resource. So, Rick, he shares, as you mentioned, the 8 pillars in the book. And we mention that as well, so in our book, Breaking Average, we kind of highlight David. Why? Because he's a leadership expert on trust. And so it's so cool. I love his take. He says that this trust stuff is work we have to do every day to live out being a high trusted leader. And I like that thought. Because I asked him, what's the one word that really describes it all? And he said, work. And then he talked about examples. So there's 2 words. And I thought that was cool because he's really talking about dependability. If you want trust from your team, we're talking about dependability. And we can't discount this thing at all. We want team members to be dependable, and they need us to be dependable. So let's dive deeper. What is dependability? Why is this important? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I like when the way we focus on words, and John. I love his focus on consistency, John Maxwell. In fact, he talks about when you start to go into your year-end review, like it's not a sexy word to be called consistent, right? And dependable kind of fits up there as well, right? Consistency, I think, is a pillar of dependability, like we talked about in that 8 pillars of trust. But consistent and dependable go hand in hand. There's no safer feeling for me, just personally, than being in the presence of someone who is dependable. And I like to think about when you start to have your varying levels of dependability. Just a quick question, like when you call for help, when you're in need and you call for help, like you need help, and we can go on the emergency side. You're calling, for the police or for the fire or for the paramedics, or you kind of have an implied dependability. You pray that when you make that phone call, they're going to show up. And when your life's on the line, you want that doctor that's about to perform surgery to be dependable. And there's implied dependability. There's an implied dependability. Speaking of Mike, at there for his son right now, of being a parent. There's a dependability that when your child says, I need you, like I need something, that you're going to show up. There's an implied dependability for people at work. And it's just, when you start to look at it from that layer, start to peel the onion back a little bit, right? These various layers of dependability. I've never been in the military, but I can imagine Mike, who we're so thankful has served, has some sort of bond with some of the people that he served with, that was built on dependability that's completely unshakable.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that John Maxwell says a lot, that right, respect is gained on difficult ground. I think dependability is earned on difficult ground. I think when the rubber meets the road, and stuff happens, things fall, emergencies occur, I think dependability is what gets measured at that point. How did you show up? Why did you show up? What did you do when you showed up? I even get into this, and I know we're going to talk about this on the next podcast, but to me too, that's around service and the service to our people. There's almost everybody right now on this podcast would say, if we ask them to serve in some capacity, oh yeah, I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you serve?
Yeah.
How did you show up? Were you as dependable as the paramedic showing up?
Yeah.
Or were you as dependable as the ambulance chasing lawyer? I'm not saying that in a bad way. Or the bystander who just wanted to see what was going on. Like, what was the varying degree of how you showed up?
Yeah. Showing up. I mean, that's the key word, right? Dependability. Do they show up? Are they here consistently? And those 8 pillars, fantastic, right? Are they committed to it? You talked about commitment as one of the pillars. Consistency is another one. Let's not discount the few other ones that, and again, we'll unpack this some more next week, I think. But clarity, compassion, character. What's your character? Your competency, connection, contribution. All these 8 pillars are phenomenal. I just love this. You mentioned military. You mentioned Mike being in the Army. One of my favorite movies And Rick, maybe you've seen this, is Hacksaw Ridge. You've seen that movie, haven't you?
Oh yeah, it's a great movie. It's a great movie.
Yeah. And credit to also to Jay Johnson, who served in the Air Force. Jay is a contributing author to this chapter on trust. He's got a passion for it, and we can't wait to have him on a future podcast. But he shares that when he thinks of dependability, he immediately thinks of our nation's sentries, the men and women of our armed forces. And then, of course, he mentioned Mike. So when I think of that, I also think of that movie Hacksaw Ridge. It is a phenomenal movie. It kind of goes back almost 100 years ago. This guy was born. His name is Desmond Doss, Lynchburg, Virginia, which isn't too far. It's about 3 hours from where I live. And he enlisted to go in the Army, but he doesn't carry a rifle. So how dependable can you be? I mean, everybody that he's with, the other troops are like, what are you doing? You're not going to help us. But he's there as a medic. And it turns out there's a big battle. I'm giving away part of the story here. But he goes in and he rescues, I don't know how many different lives. I think it was 70. Rick, here's the number. 75 soldiers on Hacksaw Ridge. 75. In the middle of the night, he goes up and he saves these people. And he was awarded the Medal of Honor. Why was he awarded the Medal of Honor? Because of his trust factor, because of his dependability, because of his service. And it's just an amazing story. If you have a chance, go watch that. It is a fantastic movie. I really think that, we can learn something from that. So I had a chance to sit down with Mike, speaking of Army, and I think he'll share a little bit of his perspective here from a military standpoint, at least. And he has a great perspective on this. So let's just kind of listen in. Again, Mike couldn't join us live, but he did want to sit down and just share his thoughts because he thinks trust is so important. So here's Mike. So, hey, Mike, sorry we're missing you here for our podcast recording for our another episode on trust, but it is so good just to spend a few minutes with you before you head off doing a golf tournament with Clayton, and good luck on that. I hope he does really well. But how you doing, my friend?
Man, I'm doing good, Paul. And, that's the great thing about technology, right? Is used to back in the old days, right? Back when you and I were younger, Paul, right? You had to be there live to get the conversation going. Everybody had to be in the room. But the great thing about technology today is we can record this conversation and plug it into, a future conversation. So I'm doing good. And man, I appreciate your flexibility. My son, he's pursuing this golf dream, as you know, and part of being a leader in his life is, being there for him, being a credible leader in his life, building trust with him, and kind of, I've promised him to support his dream of becoming a professional golfer, and so he gets to play golf this weekend as we record that. He's playing in his first golf tournament of the summer. We didn't get to play a lot last year, Paul, because of COVID, and it kind of shut everything down. So we're excited about the start of the season this year.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah. And it's nice to see some of the things, I know we're not there yet, and it's going to be a long time before we're back to normal, and who knows what normal will be, but it's nice to be able to have those kind of things, those activities that folks are doing. And last week we talked about, on this idea of trust, we talked about being credible. You just talked about that with your son, and this other element where those that are on our team, and ourselves included as leaders, we need to be dependable. Mm-hmm. So we're having this conversation today on just dependability. Any quick thoughts you wanted to share while I got you on dependability?
Yeah, Paul, I when I think about dependability, it's not as easy as people think it is. It's easy for people to say, yeah, I'm dependable. Yeah, I'll do that. But then I go all the way back to my childhood, right? I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. You and I have talked about that a lot. I share, I don't share my story, my childhood story for sympathy, but I share it just to connect with people, the principles that we teach here. I had two parents that I couldn't depend on, right? I mean, they really, they brought me into the world, right? But there was some failures in their leadership, and there was some reliability issues with them, and depending on like security, safety, and all of those kind of things that our followers want, right? As leaders, and we think about breaking average, as a leader and as teams, our followers need leaders who are dependable, who can count on, who they can count on. And so when I think about dependability and teams, it's really about having trust with those that we're in the foxhole with. I'm a former military guy, Paul, that, and your dad is a former military guy. And I know you have an affinity for, for the military as well, but we always had this saying in the Army, I got your six, and that meant I have your back no matter what, and you can depend on it. And I may not always agree with everything. Paul, you and I have been friends now for over 10 years, for almost 10 years. It'd be 10 years, Paul. 10 years in August.
I know. 10
is
years.
when I met you. Can you believe
crazy.
that? I just thought about that. August 2011 is when I met you.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on 10 years of friendship. But one of the things that you and I think we have a respect for one another is because we're both dependable. We don't always agree. You and I have had some very heated discussions about things, because we're both passionate, right, about what we do and our service to the world, but we're also very dependable. I depend on you, you depend on me for doing some of the things that we get to do. And that's really what dependability is all about.
Yeah, so good. It's well said. And I love your take on got your six, the whole military standpoint. It's so important, when we have that trust in one another, that dependability with one another, the good things will happen when we can depend on others. And think about the other side of it, Mike. If somebody's not dependable, just really what it does to the team, to everybody, to the leader, to the vision that was cast. So dependability is really key. So again, wishing you the best with Clayton. I hope he does really well. Can't wait to hear the story on that. So we'll get a chance to do that, but we'll miss you.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for having the opportunity to kind of chime in a little bit and plug me into the conversation you're going to have with Rick and Diane. And we're excited. He's got to depend on his swing and his training. There's an old saying, Paul, I've heard it in the military. We used to say, you'll fall to the level of your preparation, right? Clayton has prepared well, so he should rise to the occasion. We're really looking forward to it. But I appreciate you, man, even thinking about it.
Yeah, he can depend on that training. That's a good point. I mean, all the training we do, sometimes we go in still with fear and anxiety, but if we just remember all the preparation we did going in, that's going to help us. It's going to help us.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah. And when you do that, look, we're thinking about dependability, preparation for teams like breaking average, teams that break average, preparing together, like preparing for success together, or preparing. I was just having a conversation with a customer recently, and teams that prepare together for success, but also for what if, right? Like catastrophe. I do, Paul, as you know, I do a lot of work in the healthcare industry, hospitals, and preparation for mass casualties, or in events in our communities, right? I mean, recently we're coming off of, as we record this, a mass shooting in Colorado, another tragic event, and hospitals have to prepare for that, right? They prepare for those things, not when they happen, but before they happen, so they can depend on each other as teammates in the battle, so to speak. So dependability is key. And when we train together, that's how teams depend on each other. When we train together, I can depend on you to give me your best. I don't have doubt. Okay. Is Paul ready for this? Is Paul going to be there for this? When we train together, when we prepare together, I can go into it and give my best effort, because now I don't have doubt in my mind. And that's what preparation dependability is all about to me.
And I'm really excited about that too, because there's another factor that we're going to be hitting on shortly on ownership, and you can't get to ownership without dependability. So let's pick that up here shortly. Again, best of luck with you and Clayton, and I can't wait to hear the story.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yep. All right. Well, that was one way to bring Mike in. Thank you for technology, right?
That's right.
We can depend on Zoom, right? That's the technology we learned to use here. And, we want to hear from you guys, though. What are the things, the characteristics of dependability that you see in a leader, see in an organization, see in a team? Visit us at breakingaverage.com and let us know. But Rick, I want to get into how do we cultivate the spirit of dependability? And that's why we're asking the question, what are some of those characteristics? Because knowing those characteristics, those values is one way to do it. But what are some of your strategies to really cultivating dependability in others?
Well, I think it starts with modeling the behavior. You can't really anticipate, expect, or promote dependability in others if you're not dependable yourself. And so it's making the commitment, it's showing up, it's fighting the battle. One of the things that I've realized in the last probably year and a half, Paul, it's been a big awakening year for me. And one of the things is dependability and service to myself.
Hmm.
And it came through. I actually was doing some work and somebody that we'll potentially have on the show is a pretty big name, but I'm not going to say his name yet. We're going to keep teasing that. Everybody keeps asking me what this app is and who this person is I'm working with. But in a conversation with him, this came out of me, which was if I have a client and I've booked a client and I'm supposed to do something, dependability is key to me. It's I'm there, I show up, I work hard, but I have failed to treat my own business and failed to treat my own life as I would my client. Like I would always serve to the detriment of myself versus in service of myself. And so it's a big piece of learning how to show up. And showing up means showing up when you don't want to, when you're tired. One of the biggest things we've documented on the show for me has been my weight battle. Mike and I are both in this, he and I are close to our dream bodies, we keep saying, but I mean, I've lost a significant amount of weight, and part of that was being dependable to myself and showing up even when I don't want to. In fact, when we're done with this podcast recording today, I have a workout session and I rarely feel like going. I always feel fantastic when I'm done, but I rarely feel like getting into the car to go. But I want to model the behavior to my kids that I've made a commitment and that I'm going to see it through. And I've announced an intention to this podcast that I'm going to lose weight and keep it off. And I needed to be dependable in my word that I do. So I think modeling the behavior is the key. The other thing is to use the ability of being dependable as the start of a relationship. Show up first. And so a couple of different examples from a work perspective. One, a lot of times I get asked to do partnerships with different organizations, right? They want to partner with us. And when you become a partner, a lot of times once you sign the dotted line, they're like, okay, big company, what are you going to do for me now? Like, I'm a partner now, give me leads, give me sales, give me that stuff. Whatever I'm asked, what I do is say, I'll tell you what, let me go find the first deal and I'll bring it to you. And based on how that works, then we can become partners. What I'm doing on that is, number one, I'm not signing up yet, right? Because I don't know quite yet if it's something I'm really passionate about, right? Like I hear the opportunity, I want to see it. But then as I go to deploy it, I know I can be dependable. I know I can commit to this organization. And at the point that I'm bringing business to them, I'm also showing up unexpectedly for them, right? I'm bringing business with me when I show up, which gives that extra layer of credibility and dependability. So that's one. Number two, the other thing I suggest is to switch the game a little bit. And I'll give you an example there. I got a chance to do a contract with the House of Representatives. If you've ever dealt with the government in trying to get a contract through with them, right? There's the RFP, and then you got to do all these different things. It's a huge process. And they were looking to change the culture of their organization. So they approached me and I said, look, I'm going to be a different contractor or consultant than you've ever dealt with it before. And they were like, yep, we have this process. And I said, well, I can't do that process though. I'm sorry. I said, first of all, like one of the things they wanted me to do is provide 10 references. And I said, look, I can give you 10 names and they're going to say great stuff about me, but that's not going to get you any closer in whether or not I'm the person that can work for you. I said, why don't we do this? I'll come up there for 2 days and let's just, you get everybody in the room that you want to get into the room, and let's get a whiteboard. And at the end of the 2 days, we'll have a direction to go. And you can decide at that point whether or not I fit into the direction. And they're like, so you're going to give us 2 days of free consulting? I said, no, I'm going to give you 2 days of relationship building. And we're going to find out then if that relationship goes forward. And the response I got was, you are unlike any consultant we've ever had before. And I ended up getting the deal. But the point is I put in first.
Yeah.
Then I showed up, then I delivered. Now, if they had said at that point, yeah, you're not the person, I would have only been out of 2 days worth of work. If you look at the typical sales cycle, I could have probably put weeks into trying to win that business and still not win it. Right. So there's a way to show up and to use dependability at the start of a relationship to build the commitment and trust that you're looking for the long term, as well as showing up for yourself by limiting the amount of time that you've got to invest. And so I use that often, like most of the time, new clients, I'll say, look, why don't we just get together for 2 days? Let's hash it out on a whiteboard. And worst case scenario, you'll be further along than you are now. And you can use that information to go find somebody who would work for you if I'm not the person.
Well, you're raising a great point here, Rick. You're saying that dependability is really centered on relationships. And I love that. I mean, it really resonates with me because I'm thinking through all the examples of dependability, and I can't think of any of them where relationships isn't the key central cement, if you will, of the why behind why dependability is so important. We look at whatever the service is that's being offered to us, or the product that we're trying to get, is the dependability of it. People don't buy an iPhone unless it's dependable, or an Android device, or whatever your smartphone is. You're going to go buy another one because why? It's dependable, right? The service that you get, the ones that you choose not to get anymore, well, they're not dependable, and that's not a relationship that you want to keep. But the ones that are, yeah, they're dependable. That's a relationship you want to keep. Dependability kind of drives everything. Dependability is the center point of trust. And like you said earlier, dependability is built on difficult ground. It's not easy. It's not easy. You flying up from Birmingham to DC to spend 2 days, that takes a little bit of work. That takes a commitment. So dependability is the follow through on the commitment that you make. And I love that take, what you have. And David Horsager, I mean, how blessed were we to have David Horsager join us, the trust expert, who really has, he's literally written 3 books now on trust. And he shares a powerful precept that we share in the book, Breaking Average. Trust is a confident belief in someone or something. It is the confident belief in an entity to do what is right, to deliver what is promised, and to be the same every time, whatever the circumstances. I love that. And we share in the book that, we can cultivate dependability by others by being consistent, accountable, caring. Those are some of the factors there. And we're going to be talking about the serving part, which I think is really, really important. So next week, we're going to land the plane, because how do you measure it? You measure it through the serve. And we're going to be hitting that next week. So, hey guys, listen, David Horsager is our in-kind sponsor. We're so excited to have that interview with him today. And then part 2, you got to watch and listen next week. But we invite you. He's created a special resource just for you, a Breaking Average listener and watcher. Just go to trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average, trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average, or go to breakingaverage.com. So Rick, time to land the plane, man. This has been a great conversation. We've had a lot of different elements. We've missed Diane. We've missed Mike, although we had him cameo-wise on a video. But, let's land the plane. What's your tip and challenge that you'd love to share our listeners today?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm going to go a little bit of a different angle on dependability. And my tip is, don't say yes to everything. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but I tend to use the word accountable and dependable when I say no. And when somebody says, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z, or would you be willing to do this? And you say, I'd love to, but due to my commitments right now, I don't know that I could be a dependable resource for you. Yeah. And when I say yes to you, I want to show up. And I think that has an opportunity to build the relationship as well. And so what I've had to start doing, because I used to say yes to it all, Paul, mm-hmm. And I would just kill myself. And then I'd have to deliver to 50 people and I'd have 49 people upset. You know what I mean? Like it was just something I had to do. And so the first question and my challenge to you is, when somebody asks you for your commitment, is to ask yourself, how committed are you on a 1 to 10? And if I can't say 8 or above, then I'm gonna say no to that opportunity, just because I want to make sure that if I say yes, my word's my bond, I'm dependable, and I show up. So I say my tip is don't say yes to everything, and my challenge is to question how committed you are before you actually say yes.
Wow, I want to pull on that. I love that tip and challenge. I'm going to pivot off mine because I had something else lined up, and maybe I'll share a little bit of that later. But what you say is so important. I just want everybody to kind of lean in on what Rick's talking about. We have a propensity to say yes to things, right? When somebody that we like and we know and we trust asks us to do something, we tend to say yes, right? I do. Rick, you do too, right?
I do way too much. Yeah.
So every yes is a potential no to something else. We've said that before on this podcast. Worst yet, when we're in a position where we've said yes to so many things, we feel exhausted, and we know, sometimes we just can't. We're human. We've got a capacity that we can't do everything. As much as we want to, we can't do everything. And so Rick's point's spot on. Don't say yes to everything. In fact, you don't have to say no either right away. Be ready to say no, be willing to say no, make sure that the other person's ready to accept your no. And so I learned this one a few years ago, and I've got to put this back into practice too. And you've reminded me of it, Rick. Sometimes when somebody asks you something, you don't have to respond to them right away. And you say, hey, look, I thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of that. Thanks for the invitation. I want to explore my calendar. I want to see if I can. I may not be able to. Are you okay if I can't? Are you okay if I have to say no? We talked about this before, but I think that message of being able to pronounce, basically it's a proactive stance to saying no, because that gets them in a position to saying, you know what? Yeah, okay. I understand you're pretty busy. You may not be able to, but thanks for thinking of me. And maybe you can offer somebody else, maybe there's other ways you can serve them without saying yes. And, and you'll feel a lot more comfortable when you have to go back to them an hour or a day later and tell them, yeah, I can't do that. I'm sorry. Because you've already preconditioned them to the no, and you've conditioned yourself to the things that matter the most for you in terms of what your commitments are and what you need to do. So I love that tip and challenge, Rick. I'm going to echo that one. Don't say yes to everything. Sometimes no is your best yes for something else. So cool, man. Rick, let's close this down, man. This is good. I love that tip and challenge that you shared. And then any other thoughts that you want to add?
No, I just want people to focus on that question just to make sure they heard it, which is, Are you okay if I say no? Like, is it okay if I say no? And watch their reaction.
Yeah.
Because I've had that happen where I've said no, and I found out later that they committed me to that group. So it still hit on my dependability. Yeah. Basically, people big talk, oh yeah, I'll get Rick to do that. He'll say yes to me. I've known him forever. And then when he came to me and I was like, nah, I can't do that right now. He was like, what? Right. Yeah. And so asking that up front is a great way to kind of find that out. So I love that. That's a great way to find out how committed they want you to be as well. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely because that's part of it, right? Because you want to see what do they really need? Are they just trying to pass the buck off and maybe get out of something that they need that's required of them to be dependable on? Because sometimes people ask, for a favor because they don't want to do it. Maybe the onus is on them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Hey, I did want to give a final shout out to David Horsager as well. Make sure that you go to trustedleaderbook.com/breaking average and show out for us. Click on that link. Tell them that you heard about it right here on the Breaking Average podcast.
Yeah, so good. Such an important topic, trust. Great conversation today, Rick. I've really enjoyed it. We've missed Diane and Mike. We'll have you guys back soon, but great topic once again on Breaking Average. For all our listeners and viewers, thank you so much for being a part of this. Share this with others. Hit like. Go to our any of the platforms that share podcasts. We're on, I think, every single one of them, at least most of them. If there's one that we're not on, let us know so we can figure out a way to get on there. YouTube, go there. You know, obviously we're also being aired simulcast on the Empowered Living show. You know, we need that feedback. You know, that feedback helps us. You know, let us know what's striking, what's hitting a chord for you. But share this with other people. Share it with other people, because we're all on the same mission, guys. We're all on the same mission to help people break average. Think about it. We want to add value to other people. What's the best way to add value? To encourage them to do more, to be more, to really to see more, right? So yes, share this, and we're so thankful for having you. So join us next time as we hit part 3 on the whole trust factor, and we've got the second interview with David Horsager. It's going to be really fantastic. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.